Dot Tank is done. The last update for it, the second expansion, the expansion of hexagons, has now been released onto GameJolt and itch.io. So if you want to go and play it, a link to that will be in the description below. But now I have a new game that I'm working on, and as you can tell from the title, it is called Dot Adventure. It's going to be a different game. It's similar to my other ones. It's a top-down RPG focused on the invasion of the hexagons into the world of Shape-Gia. This is going to be a lot bigger of a game compared to my other ones. And I don't know when it's going to be fully released yet, but it's sometime next year, so don't expect anything too soon. Though I know it'll be playable by the start of the 2023 school year. So I've been working on it for a while over the summer while I've been finishing up the Dot Tank expansions and not having any schoolwork. So I've got a month of progress to discuss in this first video. First, I've had a lot of focus on the weapons. There's technically 5 different weapon types: piercing, slashing, bludgeoning, ranged, and bombard. Piercing are spears and attack straight, forward and back. Slashing are up and down. Bludgeoning are also up and down, but slower in comparison to slashing attacks. Ranged is any shot that goes straight ahead, which includes both boomerangs, which are bullets that will, after a certain distance, move back to its point of origin from where it was shot. And then normal straight shots, which go forward until they reach a certain distance, in which they destroy themselves. And then there's also bombards, which is effectively the same thing as the artillery system as I used in Dot Tank. So you click a button, it sends up a shot that lands there and explodes for damage. And there's, I think it's like 70 something weapons. Maybe less than that. I don't actually know straight off the top of my head. But there's a lot of them, each divided into different types. And one of the hopes I'm hoping for later is for augments, in which a player will be able to add certain features to it. So you could do elemental attacks, and there's 4 elemental attacks: frost, shock, fire, and plasma. Frost increases future damage. Fire deals damage over time. Shock, like in Dot Tank, slows down enemies. And plasma deals extra damage that pierces through armor. So a player can update their weapon so now they deal that damage, or they have other features to the augmenting, but I haven't gotten to that yet because it's a little bit more complicated than I have right now. And for all my weapons, I've now worked on the basics of inventory. So when you collect item, it adds it to the inventory, which stores it as an ID value, which the computer can trace back to a certain item, and then it displays it when you go into the inventory. So there's also chests, which holds special several items. Then when you unlock them, it blasts them out around you. And in case you already have that item, it adds it as a multiple. So now you have two apples instead of just one, which is a pretty simple system. But all of that doesn't have images yet, and that's what I want to talk about next. Is I've done a few pixel art tutorials, and I'm using some new skills, so I'm happy with the new look of some of the items. So all the base images for the weapons are currently there, but not the inventory yet, or any of the UI. I'm doing that later on, and images may be subject to change later on, but that's what I have for right now. And now I've also started focusing on the magic. Magic is spells that take away from your mana. It's effectively like all other RPGs. Nothing that different there, but there'll be different spells that correlate to each shape. And if you want to learn another shape's magic, you have to find these books. And then once you have found the volume that allows you to cast spell level 1, then it'll allow you to cast hexagon spells of level 1, and if you find all the 5 books, because there's 5 levels for each spell, for each shape, then you can cast any spells of that type. But not all characters will be able to cast all spells, as at the start of the game you'll have to choose a class, and there's going to be 3 classes: warrior, rogue, and mage. Warriors have higher health and deal extra damage. Rogues are faster and have more movement, and mages can cast spells, or cast more spells. All the classes can cast spells, but not all can cast like the higher level spells. Only mages can cast level 4 and 5 spells and have a higher mana total. Additionally, this is the first game where you'll be able to play as other shapes. So you're not just playing as the dots, you can also play through from the squares or the triangles, and hopefully the hexagons too. So there'll be 4 different playthroughs, and I'm hoping to have 3 different playthrough styles. Each of them you can do from any of the shapes, except the hexagons, which will be slightly different. But you can either work with the other shapes to defeat the hexagons, work by yourself, like if you're playing as the dots, you don't help the other shapes to defeat the hexagons, or just kind of screw the world and don't actually help anyone and just let the world destroy. Because the way it'll end up working is there'll be a war power system, which will continually grow as the hexagons grow more powerful. And if they ever become 50%, like become half of the world's power, they'll just win. So you have to defeat them before this happens, but there'll be plenty of ways for you to slow this down so you have time to go and do other things. But it's a lot of stuff, and I've condensed it down a lot, but that's what I've focused on this summer, and I'll be focusing more on now as I head to school. But from here, I'm going to be focusing on the enemies. Right now there's just a base enemy thing where attacks, it can accept damage, but it doesn't accept elemental attacks or all that stuff, so I have to go and update all this stuff. And then also create the enemy movement. For .tank, I used a pretty simple A-star, which worked great, but if you play with if there's a lot of enemies, they start to layer on top of each other, and they couldn't really accept other forces. And so there's a tutorial for it by Brackley's, which I'm sure will be great. I haven't done it yet, but it will effectively do all the A-star stuff, but within code, so I can then apply extra forces that the normal A-star wasn't able to handle, and then cut out some stuff that wasn't really necessary. But there'll be a handful of types of enemies: ranged, melee, magic, and combo, which will use a combination of the other 3. But that's what my focus will be on for this next week, and for most likely the next month, hopefully. And next week I'll have another video out again on Friday, which will detail what I was able to get done this weekend and through the week, and hopefully I'll be able to get the range control down, as I have some other projects that need that code to be done here. So that is it for the beginning, my first devlog of my summer progress on Dot Adventure. Next week I'll have more. Thank you for watching, and subscribe so you have more information as it comes out about Dot Adventure.